everybody. Welcome to another episode of Orange Grove 55. I brought some very, very special guests on the show with me today. I have three guests, actually. I have Mr. VashSky, host of Freshly Squeezed. I have Mr. Disney Family Man 23 and Rudio, who is a fan favorite the last time. Rudio, a lot of people blew up my comments saying they loved you, man. A lot of love for Rudio.
Thank you guys. I mean, it's a pleasure just to talk Disney and to talk Disney with you guys. It's an awesome experience. So I'm glad to be back here again.
Well, it's a pleasure having you back on, brother. And today we're going to talk about Bob Chapek, and there's a lot to discuss. The other day, I believe, and actually, Dre, correct me if I'm wrong, was it CNBC that he made these comments about Splash Mountain?
I think so. You know what? I don't actually know the news outlet that where he made these news comments, where he made these comments too. So I'm not sure. We'll go with CNBC.
We'll go with CNBC. I'm not 100% certain either, but he was talking. He was interviewed about the changes, the upcoming changes to Splash Mountain, and he had, a lot of, within this short amount of time, quite a few gaffes where he said not once but twice that Splash Mountain is over 60 years old. Dre, I know you have a lot of opinions on this. What are your thoughts on this, where Chapek does not even know the decade in which Splash Mountain opened at Disneyland?
Well, do we want to play the audio? I got the audio if we want to play it.
Roll it.
Yeah, go ahead and play it. I think that might be a good idea. If you got it on deck, go ahead and play it.
We made a decision to change some of our attractions that are in our parks that have been around for a long, long time. Again, now this goes back to the legacy issue and, super fans not wanting anything to change. But when you really take a hard look at an attraction that's been there for over 60 years, and you realized it's based on Song of the South, and Song of the South is based on a story which, depicts happy slaves, that is probably not, a place that we all want to be and a place that Disney wants to be. So you have to have, again, wrapping all this up, you have to have the courage to go ahead and change something that's been, pleasing a good number of people, has really high guest ratings for the last 60 years. And make the change so that you could not only talk about making positive change, but really get into it and make those changes. And so we're going to walk the talk, and we're going to hire people that have diverse. The people that are working on the conversion of that to the Tiana story are very diverse. And so we'll make sure that it's not somehow lost in interpretation in terms of how that story should be told in a very uplifting and accurate way.
All right.
You need boots to listen to this guy.
So Dre, after hearing the audio,
sorry about that. I thought it would be a good refresher for everybody.
No, that's great. I'm glad you had that. What are your thoughts on that little soundbite? There's a lot to chew on. It's not a very lengthy soundbite, but there's a lot to chew on.
There's so much to chew on, and I know a lot of people are keying in on the obvious mistakes. I mean, it's like, okay, the Splash Mountain was 60 years ago, presuming it's like an opening day attraction. Okay, that's completely wrong, just right out the gate. But, there's, and then these, he's talking about happy slaves, and we all know that Song of the South is set during the Reconstruction era. So that's, inaccurate. But more than these inaccuracies really is he obviously doesn't know the product, but he also doesn't know the customer in a lot of ways. I mean, he even says high satisfaction surveys with Splash Mountain, and yet we're getting rid of this attraction, even though it does post high satisfaction surveys. And then the reasoning that he uses to do that is complete. I mean, it's a tale of lies. And presumably you could just make up anything, as he did, and get rid of anything, even if it does have high customer satisfaction surveys. So as far as a CEO position, I know people are harping on the mistakes, and the mistakes are egregious, especially if you have this much invested in this kind of project. Right. But the larger implications of this, I think, are really bad. Go ahead.
Wow. Well, yeah, Rudio, what are your thoughts on this little clip from Bob Chapek?
As somebody who's sat through multiple D23 Expo park panels, this is not surprising. This is just showing people to the world now with public statements like this that the guy doesn't really know the history of the company. Yeah. And it shows on those presentation panels when he's trying to present these projects and these resorts. It almost feels just so like he's trying to drive a reaction out of everybody, but it doesn't hit with what would be the super fan, as he likes to call us. So it shows where he's at with the company, and it shows how much he knows about the company with statements like this being out in the public.
Yeah, definitely agree with you, Rudio. And it's like, you know, like as Disney CEOs go, I don't need my CEO to know the nitty gritty details. I don't need him to know that Bob Gurr designed the Matterhorn bobsleds or anything like that. But at least when it comes to this, at least get the decade right.
Yes.
You know, I mean,
simple information.
Or don't say anything at all. Go ahead, George. What do you think?
What do you think, George?
Oh, where do I begin? First off, Rudio, I actually agree with you because I'm glad that, you know, with you going to the D23 events, I have been to many myself to see him in person. And please tell me, because I actually say this constantly, when the man stands on a stage, if he doesn't have a teleprompter, it's like a deer in headlights.
Oh man, just when he's talking and there's not a teleprompter and he's trying to improv, especially there was a few years ago when he was at the I want to say 2015 Parks panel. He was on stage with Stan Lee and another Imagineer, and they were presenting the Iron Man attraction at Hong Kong. And something must have happened within the teleprompter, or there was an improvisation, and it just came off so bad. And I'm like, oh God, I hope this doesn't hit the internet or it doesn't hit an airwave. And it hasn't, unless you really go YouTube it. But it's just simple knowledge facts and just teleprompter. It just, if he's not given a script and he's having an interaction with either a guest or an interview, he needs to be given bullet points or something, because the man he doesn't come off as the best talking or the best PR representative Disney should have as a CEO.
Now, do you fellas think, and I'm going to start with you, Dre, do you fellas think that this is just a guy who has his stuff together, but maybe isn't a good public speaker? He's not good at articulating his point. He's an intelligent guy, but some people just don't have that ability to get in front of people and talk and articulate a point. They get nervous, they get stage frightened. Dre, do you think there's a little bit of this going on, or do you really believe that this is like he just is completely oblivious?
Obviously, he's qualified. You know, he was qualified for the position of consumer products. And so he's intelligent in that regard. And he knows that world well for sure. As somebody who struggles with articulating points, quite frankly, if you watch this show for any length of time, I do think he's a little, he just doesn't have that stage presence, doesn't have that camera presence. He's not that guy that, you kind of want to, snuggle with at the end of the night and have him read you a bedtime story. He's not that guy.
Or as they say in politics, someone to have a beer with, right? You wouldn't necessarily want to have a beer with Chapek.
Apparently, I felt like I needed a beer after listening to
I mean, look, he's an intelligent, I'm sure he's very intelligent, but as far as, he ran the parks division for a number of years, and he doesn't understand that Splash Mountain's not opening day attraction.
Well,
look,
okay. No. Get finished.
Oh, no. Well, I was just going to say, look, I understand that he's the CEO. I understand that, there's so many tendrils that the Disney company branches off into. I get that. I understand that. But this is something that you have significant investment in the Splash Mountain project. You should know 6 Ways to Sunday, what got you to that decision, why you made that decision, the history of that attraction, so forth, because it is such a big investment. And the fact that he doesn't know those basic things, and even if you don't know, even if you're unsure, just leave it out of it. Trust me, that would have helped me quite a few times in previous shows. But go ahead, George. What were you going to say?
No, what I was going to say, going off to what you were saying, Vash, was because we were having this conversation in our private messaging on Twitter and what have you, that I do think he's a very intelligent man. You know, he does have a lot of aspirations to his goals of where he wants to be, but when it comes to the actual product, he doesn't know. And I think it's just to the notion of where, again, I think Disney was in a situation where they threw Chapek into the lion's den, so to speak, because they were running out of options. In my personal opinion, I felt that Tom Staggs was basically gearing up to become CEO after Iger. When that fell out with the board and Tom Staggs left, they had no one else in their minds of thinking, okay, well, who else could be better than Iger that was supposed to be replaced by Staggs? So they probably just kept on going. And I think that's why even Iger stuck around for as long as he did. And it just fell down to, okay, well, we have to put someone in here. Who's it going to be? Well, let's go with the chairman of Parks and Resorts. You know, let's just go with Chapek. And I think it's just where it's almost like trying to teach a child how to stand and walk for the first time. And I think that's even why, because if you really think about it, when Iger went in, he just went in as CEO. You know, you have Chapek, who is CEO, and you still have right now Iger as a consultant, you know, until at the very end of the year. Why? If he was that qualified, why would you just move into the role as CEO? And it clearly shows. I mean, I can understand, you know, if you would have messed up a few years and then you say, oh, you know what? I made a mistake. It was this. But to say 60 years, to say that Splash Mountain was built and opened in 1961, that's bad.
Yeah.
That is really, I think, really, really bad. And I just don't even understand to automatically know that everything now is on social media. People talk, the Disney community they will catch every single word that will come out, especially the CEO.
Yeah.
You know, we're wanting this guy to succeed. I want him to succeed. As the CEO, I don't want him to crumble and fail. I want him to move this company forward. But it's kind of hard to have faith, trust, and pixie dust in someone who constantly, when he talks, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
He just goes around in circles.
Yeah, Rudio, what are your thoughts? You think this is like, you know, like stage fright, or it's just like he just really doesn't know, he's oblivious? What are your feelings on it?
It's weird. Okay, so like I'm going to use this comparison, the sports comparison. So especially in the NBA, it's more recent than other sports right now. Is when a team is doomed or has an unsuccessful season, the first person that they go to, the fall guy, is the head coach. It's never the star player. It's never the GM. It's never the owner. It's always the head coach. And I think that knowing what was going to happen, they assigned that position to Chapek to be the fall guy. No matter what was going to happen within the pandemic, even pre-pandemic, they knew certain things were going to happen within these few years. And we know that Bob Iger wanted to leave and that he had said on previous occasion that I'm out of the company on this day, and that the company needed to find just a resolution to the problem. And I think Chapek was the assistant coach who, I mean, he knew parks to an extent. He knows Disney history to an extent, but to be the CEO, I just never saw it in him. He was always the consumer guy. He was the guy who, like, when that presentation happened 2 years ago at the 2019 D23 Expo, when they said that the Disney stores were going to be incorporated into Target stores, I'm like, this is a total Chapek move. The fact that this is being presented to us, and as park fans, we don't really care that Disney stores are going to be in Targets. It's just not in our nature. But being as the consumer guy, that was such a big deal to him. And so it's just little things like that. They hit the mark with him, but they don't hit the mark to a Disney fan like somebody like I am. It's just I understand where he's at with the company, and I understand that he's done some pretty good things with the company, especially with the deal that he did with Hasbro when they first got the licensing to Star Wars. He's had great moments with the company, but he's also had some pretty bad moments with the company. So
yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. It's a weird, complicated situation with Chapek. I kind of disagree a little bit with you fellas in regards to the choice of Chapek. Well, let me put it this way. I think that he kind of, because when they made the announcement, which was in February, it was like right when the pandemic was sort of rearing its head. It wasn't a full-blown thing yet, but it was sort of like you can see it coming, right? It was here, but it wasn't fully here. I kind of get the feeling, and I could be wrong, I feel like Chapek was always the guy, but they pushed the announcement earlier because they didn't want to have the announcement in the middle of a full-blown pandemic. So better to have it early on than have it in the middle of the pandemic. So what they did was they probably weren't going to announce this until like summer of 2020 or something. But since the pandemic was looming, they're like, you know what, let's push it ahead, get it before this thing really gets bad. You know what I'm saying? So it didn't happen right in the middle.
I do agree. I do agree with you of that. I think as far as the timing when they announced it, just at the beginning when everything was, they wanted to kind of get it done, get it out of the way.
Yeah.
I just feel that not really the answer being Chapek right away, but I think, as I said, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, that all of this started when everyone had high hopes for Stags to take over Iger. That's where I think it started to decline. I really think that if Stags or who else was the other guy?
Kevin Mayer.
Yeah, yes. I think that honestly, if one of them two would have become CEO, whatever the reason it was that they didn't, whether it was just, not agreeing with the board or doing a TikTok move, or what have you. It's just, I just think that they would have done, if they would have just kind of stayed away from that, I think that they would have been a much better fit for CEO. As Rudio said, I think he is much better with the consumer product. Keep him in the consumer product because that's his strength.
Yeah.
But to run a whole entire company that has how many different legs to the body, I just don't think that this is his fit. And I'm really honestly surprised that he didn't come on and make a statement about his mistakes of how it was all over the place. I'm really surprised that he didn't say anything as of yet.
Well, and you see, Bob Iger was really smart. And I don't know if this was on purpose or not. It probably was because Bob Iger is a very calculating, smart guy, strategic guy. But I was talking to, I think it was Dre, I think it was you, where like we were talking about how Bob Iger, early on in his tenure of CEO, he made moves to build that trust with the fan community where he got the rights back to Oswald. He bought Pixar. He did things very early on that sort of gained that trust in the fan community. I don't see that same like relationship building with Chapek. I feel like it's actually quite the opposite. He's sort of stumbling a lot, and PR wise, he's not as savvy as a Bob Iger. I mean, how are you feeling about that, Dre, in terms of
it's just kind of weird because it's strange because it's like he's not even attempting to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of Disney fans are confused about like, man, what made this guy the guy? Why was this guy selected? And to your point, I mean, maybe he could have been the guy and they were holding off an announcement in June or something to that effect later on down the year in 2020, and they had to move it up because of the pandemic. Maybe.
Yeah.
But that also brings up questions like, man, do you really change out, you have a big executive shakeup right before this devastating impact is going to hit your company? I mean, even if you were going to do it in the middle, do you do it in the middle? I mean, it just, to me, everything felt weird. Everything felt off. And I mean, this brings up another point. Do we really want to go into what the speculation or the theory is regarding his position and the timeliness of the role, and so to speak. Do we want to go into that?
Yeah, dude, let's do it. Let's dive in. Let's get into it.
All right. So, we had a mutual I don't know, YouTuber who came out with a theory, a Mr. DSNY newscast.
Yeah, you can mention him, DSNY.
Yeah, DSNY. And he had a theory as to all of this.
Okay.
As far as like, hey, maybe Chapek was never going to be the guy. Maybe he's just put there in a role, so to speak, to be the CEO, to make hard decisions during this pre-pandemic time, given a short contract, like a 2-year contract. And he's going to be either the fall guy or the hatchet man. Right. He's going to make tough decisions and bring the company, use the pandemic to bring the company where they've always wanted it to be and make up unpopular decisions. And whatever happens after those 2 years happens after those 2 years. Now, that's an interesting theory.
It is.
Because we have a mutual friend, Orange Grove and I do, who tipped off to me back in January of this year. Something to that effect. And this mutual associate has been with the company for a long time. And it was stunning to me. I almost couldn't believe it. But upon hearing it from DSNY, again, it was like, that's what I heard. That maybe the board kind of knew the effects of the pandemic, what effects it would have on their business going forward, how tumultuous that time would be, and placing this guy in this role at this point. Because we have to understand, guys, I mean, that announcement was so hastily rushed. And there was almost no forewarning that it was going to happen at all. Bob Iger, who's usually cool, calculated, relaxing guy, he's almost like disheveled when this goes off. So they really wanted to rush Chapek out there right before this all hit. And it's just some of the decisions that are being made now with this interview. It shows that he, has a lack of knowledge and it just doesn't feel like the guy even, a year and a half into the role. I don't know. This all feels strange. I wanted to play this sounder, but I didn't know. So we'll play it anyway.
He's really not in command. I mean, let's just be honest. He's probably about 6 fries short of a Happy Meal at this stage of his life.
I just wanted to play that. I thought it was kind of hit. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I see. Here's the thing. I'm really torn on it because, the theory makes sense in a lot of ways. Throw Chapek out there and kind of like let him take the fall, right? But the issue though that I have with that theory though is that like in April, I believe it was April, I'm not really 100% sure, but Bob Iger kind of regained some control. I don't know if you remember back in April or May, he regained some control of the company to sort of help Chapek steer that ship. That's the part where I'm kind of like, well, if they wanted him to sort of take the fall, why is Iger coming in and trying to kind of assist and try to help? That's the only thing that's kind of making me feel like there's something else to this. I don't know though. Rudio, what are your thoughts, man? What are your feeling on like the decision? And like, is this like a power play for like to help to maybe rescue Iger's legacy, kind of the ejector seat, so to speak? Or what are your feelings, man?
It's so weird because we all know that Bob Iger, what he wants to do or what he's planning to do after his career with Disney, he wants to get into that political ring. And so with him making these last minute moves before he leaves, it, like you said, it is going to be on his legacy. Like the next thing that you want is your politician or your political opponent to be like, hey, this guy jumped ship and the ship was burning and he decided, I'm taking my guys off the ship and we're doing this. He wants to make sure his legacy is intact. He wants to go out with another championship ring. He wants to make sure that when people think of him and his relationship with Disney, that he did it his way and he did it the right way. Mind you, he took a step back. He did what he needed to do to protect himself when the pandemic was about to happen. But I mean, in the long run, I'm always going to think to myself, Bob Iger was still with the company during this pandemic. Did he help and did he assist Bob Chapek with these moves? Absolutely. He was the right-hand guy. And I believe that a lot of the relationships that Bob Iger maintained during his step back helped the company a lot. Because I'm sure if I'm the state of California or if I'm another company, I'm calling Bob Iger. I'm not calling Bob Chapek because there's no relationship built there.
Right.
They quoted him in a lot of articles, like right in the forefront of the pandemic. Even though he was not the guy, they still quoted him. They still like talked to him. They still interviewed him, and it's like, is he the guy or is not the guy? Are you in? Yeah. What do you do?
Well, and that's why I have a hard time believing the theory that it was to sabotage Chapek, because he was too out front. Like, if you're gonna sabotage someone, then you leave completely. You don't sit there and like take interviews and try to like, you know what I'm saying? That's why that theory just doesn't. There's something there. I agree. It's just I don't know if that's 100% it. You know.
But if you wanted to guide him and make sure the company doesn't completely collapse under his watch, you would want to be there in that room. I can see arguments for and against that decision.
I do too. I could kind of see it both ways, because you can still kind of, and I really don't like using this word, and nothing against Bob Iger, but it's almost like a kind manipulation sort of thing, where it's like, well, if I'm going to leave, just remember me, remember my legacy, remember what I did for the company. So here's your comparison. Here's me, and here's Chapek.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think it's kind of like a fault of omission, where it's like, I think it's more so to boost himself up, but without even realizing you put this guy again into the lion's den, where it's, he wasn't for that role for CEO.
Yeah. Now, what do you guys think? Like, okay, so what do you guys think about? Because obviously Disney has a history of CEOs, at least in modern history, where the CEOs stay on board for a very long time. Eisner was on for like 15 years or more. Bob Iger was on for about the same. Starting with you, George, what are your thoughts on like Chapek? I mean, is he going to be a guy that's out of here in like 3 years, or is he going to go the distance, as they say in Hercules? Is he going to go the distance 10, 15 years? What's your gut telling you?
Well, here with me and Orange Grove, you and I had this conversation before, and I think sometimes it could go the other way. Sometimes after you have Big Brother off your shoulder, sometimes you can kind of then open up and kind of feel that relaxed moment. He could just be waiting to see whenever Iger goes, and it's like, okay, I'm taking full reins. What could I do? But in the back of my head, I just can't get this interview. I can't get around that. If you want to have people to back you up and you want to have your fans, have faith in you, you have to at least come close to what you're saying.
Right.
And it's one of those things where, based on everyone that I've seen, even Michael Eisner, as I said, I would take Michael Eisner back, despite the fallout that he had with Roy Disney and the board and everything coming to the end. But Eisner still did what he had to do in that time frame. When his time was up, just like how Iger's is, everyone has their faults, everyone has their high points. Right now, I can't see any high points with Chapek as CEO. As a consumer man, yes, very much so. To run the Walt Disney Company, I don't know. So to answer your question, I see him honestly maybe a few years, but I think once the company kind of gets back up on their feet, which they're in great standing right now as far as, reopening the parks and, getting everything reopened, that I think in time, to kind of stall some time, the board is going to say, when is enough enough? And as they saw with, and I can't believe I'm comparing, well, yes, I guess I could compare Chapek to Ohana Noodles. That when fans came to the calling, when they wanted something, Disney listened. And if you do it the right way, the kind way, the respectful way, the company will listen. And I think if Chapek goes down this road, that he's going and he doesn't correct himself or try to find a better way to approach being CEO, the fan community is not going to have it. And if it's detrimental to the company, the board of execs, if they stepped in with Michael Eisner, they would definitely have to step in with Chapek.
What do you think, Dre? What do you think? You think this is a guy that's here for a few years? You think that he's going to luck out and sort of go the distance? What are your thoughts?
I'm still collecting them. Let me pitch back to Rudio and then come back to me.
Okay.
Before you go to Rudio, my last thing was Orange Grove when you said go the distance like Hercules. In my personal opinion, I think he's going to be flushed like Hades, like down.
There you go. Perfect.
There you go, Mr. Rudio. What are your thoughts, man? You think this guy's going to go all the way, or is this going to be like a 2 or 3 year thing and we're done?
I think it's. I've always seen it as temporary.
Yeah.
I've never seen him as the long-term CEO. He just doesn't have. He doesn't have the charisma to hold it that position that long. I mean, through my lifetime, I've only seen 2 Disney CEOs. I've only seen Michael Eisner and Bob Iger, and both have always been out there.
Right.
I remember watching those VHS tapes and Michael Eisner popping up on them every time I got a new one. He would say, "This is the next Disney project."
Yeah.
Or watching The Wonderful World of Disney on ABC, and he would come out with Mickey Mouse, and he'd present himself. He was always out there, whether it was on ABC, Disney Channel. He was the rock star CEO of the 90s. And then as I grew older, Bob Iger being the CEO, knowing him, watching all of these interviews and going to D23 and being in the parks and seeing the acquisitions that he's made throughout the years, these guys are rock stars.
Yeah.
Like going back to the reopening of Disneyland and seeing my friend Callie Bay and him walking down Main Street and seeing everybody crowd around Bob Iger and seeing everybody crowd around who I think is positioned to be the next CEO in some way, whether it happens in the next few years or not, Josh D'Amaro. I think these guys, there's a strong relationship that I think the Disney superfan has to these guys. And I think with Josh D'Amaro having the heart, I mean, as you guys saw on Twitter, my friend's daughter went to the Disney College program with a Josh D'Amaro shirt. And that tweet blew up because everybody has a soft spot for Josh D'Amaro. And if they were to say in the next year or so, Josh D'Amaro is going to be the CEO of Disney, I don't see a lot of people having a problem with that.
No, I don't think fans have a problem with that at all. I think it would be very much celebrated. I think Josh D'Amaro is by far a fan favorite. And, you know, I think there is, when it comes to Disney CEOs or Disney executives in general, I think there is a level of a personality that comes into it. It's kind of like politics. You know, exactly. A lot of times, like, platform and policy sort of kind of falls to the backseat a little bit, and the charisma of the politician and the even the looks, unfortunately, and all that sort of plays into it. D'Amaro's, you know, he's a good-looking guy. You know, he's good with the fans. You know, you see him at Disneyland or California Adventure. He's rolled up his sleeves. He's talking. Like, I saw him, dude. He was on Maxwell Glick's Mr. Cheesy Pop's live stream for Avengers Campus. He's like, "Hey, Mr. Cheesy Pop," you know. the guy has that charisma like a Bob Iger, and that goes a long way when you're Disney CEO. What are your thoughts, Dre? What are you feeling, man, in terms of this guy? Is he gonna last, or is he gonna luck out, or what's going on?
I think I echo a lot of Rudio's thoughts where it never felt like the guy, not even for a temporary stay, but just never felt like a fit. So in some way I didn't even believe it. It's like, really, Chapek?
It was weird. That day it was announced, it was really weird. I thought it was like almost like an Onion article. Like, there's no way.
Right. Yeah, and it's just like, no, this is the guy. No, we're telling you, this is the guy. Look at over here. It's like, I'm not buying this. And so, yeah, I always, you know, to Rudio's point, always felt like it was a temporary decision, that he wasn't there for the long haul because, you know, Michael Eisner was there for, I think, like 20 years, and then now it's 15 with Iger. I don't see this guy lasting 2 more years. To be quite honest, I think
honestly, once Demaro kind of gets his standing with the company of moving up forward, then that's when they'll say that surprise, Chapek is, stepping down and Demaro's in. Because every time I see Demaro on social media, he reminds me of a young Michael Eisner. Michael Eisner was a presence in the parks. He would always walk around. He'd wear his hat or his mouse ears. Yeah, exactly. But he would just be out there with the fan community. I mean, he was in a Disney attraction, for crying out loud. I mean, he was the guy who swung the golf ball in the Palm Springs section of
California.
Hey, Mickey.
Yeah, it's interesting because, Rudio, you made a great point. These Disney CEOs are rock stars or superstars. Like Michael Eisner. This is Michael Eisner, head of the Walt Disney Company. We saw that on the Wonderful World of Disney for years and years and years. And then Bob Iger, he wasn't the same guy. Like, you would never see Bob Iger as wearing like a Mickey Mouse hat or a Mickey tie. He wasn't out front with it. He was more like Bob Iger was more like the Tony Stark of the Walt Disney Company.
Yeah.
He was kind of that smooth, billionaire guy, but he was still that guy in a different way, but he was still that guy. Chapek, I don't really know what he is. He's more like Dr. Evil in a lot of ways.
A lot of people call him that.
Yeah, a lot of people make the comparisons because it's the hair, but Bob Iger, that's the thing. There's only so many people in this world where somebody walks in a room and says, "That's the guy."
Right.
Like that, that's the head honcho right there. He doesn't even have to have a plaque, You just know that he's the guy in charge. And that's Iger for me. And from what I heard from a lot of people who have worked with Iger, it's like he has this kind of reassuring presence. He's very measured. He's very articulate. He's all these things that not only does he present himself as the guy, but through his conversation, through his mannerisms and his affect, he'll tell you without telling you he's the guy. Right. I just, like you said, I don't get that from Chapek. Not to say that Chapek's presence or managerial style is wrong and that he's not the guy, but at the same time, it's like, man, he's so not the guy that it's just it's just kind of a weird, I don't know, it's just kind of a weird thing. And I just wonder what the larger plan here is. Is he the hatchet guy? Is he the guy to make unpopular decisions, take it on his shoulders and get that golden parachute after, a couple of years in the hot seat? I really don't know. I mean, it's just, we've said it on this show multiple times. We just can't figure this out.
No.
Just can't figure them out.
And I want it to be that. I would love, I don't completely dislike the guy, but I would much rather have someone else in there. I really want that to be the case where there's some big plan where in 2 years he's out and that's been the plan all along. And I really want that to be the case. I just don't know.
Spoiler alert, folks. This is going to be the huge announcement at the 100 years of the Walt Disney Company at the next D23 Expo.
Demaro is the new CEO. Here he comes.
To celebrate our 100 years.
Yeah. And that's one thing that kind of worries me. That's one thing that kind of worries me a little bit too, though, is that being these businessmen, a lot of them are ruthless, man. You don't get to that position not being kind of ruthless and a little bit cutthroat. I hope that Chapek doesn't see the rising star of Demaro and try to say, hey, look, you're out, because he sees him climbing and is like, all right, well, you know what? I'll basically kneecap you and you're gone. That worries me,
And I have a question for the three of you before we go, because I know we're cutting time. Orange Grove, you and I had a conversation when you asked me that compared to Iger and Chapek, that, Chapek would pretty much for Splash Mountain, if it's good for profit for the consumer, he'd keep it around. But now based off of these statements, clearly Splash Mountain is still on the chopping block and the Princess and the Frog is in. So I ask you fellas, when do you really now see that attraction now shutting down and moving forward as the Princess and the Frog?
Rudy, I'll start with you on that one.
I'm going to say probably early 2022 because you're getting the Christmas crowds and you're going to need an attraction during Christmas season. As you've seen the crowds right now with the summer, you're obviously going to keep it through the end of 2021, but I do see maybe probably a February, maybe even early January shutdown of the ride. And as far as it getting reopened, maybe summer 2023 or spring around that time.
That makes sense, Rudio, because like January also kind of like that's right when like winter kind of kicks in like big time, especially here in California, like January, February, even into March, the rainy season. That would be a good time to sort of get Splash Mountain off and start working on it. It's a good guess. Dre, what are your thoughts? When do you think they're going to start the Splash Mountain retheme?
Same with Rudio. I mean, it usually goes down for its annual refurbishment anyway. Around that time, so when it goes down, at that point, it would make a lot of sense just to have it there because it's going to be down anyway. I like to it's like, oh, it's the annual refurbishment and all this kind of stuff, and it's like, did they ever do any work on it? And they do, but I always see it as kind of an operational cut. But look, I think Bob Chapek, we're talking about financing cost and profit. Yeah, I think for him this is a profit-making opportunity. If you can judge the sentiment of what's going on in the pop culture and so forth, it's consistent with that, and I think he's being consistent in that way. It's tough because he even says it's like, oh, it's got high satisfaction surveys, already, and it's like, okay, so it has high satisfaction surveys. This wasn't necessarily problematic before. I don't know. I mean, it just seems very strange, very weird to me. But I know that other people have some pretty strong opinions in the other direction. So hopefully he's making the right call. It just doesn't seem to me that it's one based on a whole lot. But we'll see.
We'll see. I have actually pretty high hopes for the Splash Mountain retheme because I do think it is, like you touched upon, Dre, a very sensitive issue for a lot of people. And I feel that if they half-ass it, it's going to be a PR freaking shitstorm, They have to hit a home run with it.
It'll be that bad. They have to sell tickets for it.
Yeah, they're going to have to really come through with this. And I think they're going to be forced to really step it up they can't do half measures on this retheme. They just can't.
Splash Mountain needed an overhaul, needed a retheme. It's very dark in there. There's a lot of problems with the attraction as it stands. Do you remember, a couple of years ago, they had problems with fall protection and stuff like that. That really hurt Splash Mountain because a lot of those catacombs and stuff to get to audio animatronics aren't fall protected in that way. And so it does need an overhaul. It does need a rethink, a redo. I'm not saying that it doesn't. If it would have been because of those decisions, I would have said, okay, fine. But the pretext that he set up, and it's a false one, as we've heard in his comments, I don't know. It gives me pause.
Yeah, absolutely, and rightfully so. I mean, the comments were a disaster. Were a pretty big problem. PR wise, it was a total disaster. Thank you, fellas, so much for coming on today. I really, really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'm going to start with, we'll start with, I always get this wrong. I know. I'll start with Vash, and then I'll work my way down to Rudio, and then George. Vash, where can they find you at home?
Best place to find me is at VashSky on Twitter. That's where a place you can interact with me. As far as video goes, hey, I'm on your channel at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info squeezed fresh right from the Grove. And yeah, we'll be coming out with episodes soon. So thank you.
Awesome. Rudio, pleasure having you on again, man. Where can they find you at home, sir?
Just find me on Instagram and on TikTok, and pretty much that's it where I'm at right now. And then I'll be, whenever you guys feel free to have me, or feel free to invite me whenever you guys want. I'm always here to talk Disney with you guys.
It's always a pleasure, Rudio, and I will definitely have you back on the show again. It is a pleasure. You're always welcome on the show, sir.
Thank you.
And Mr. Family Man, where can they find you at home?
Of course. Well, you can find me on my YouTube channel at Disney Family Man 23. See, I'm getting better at it.
Yeah.
On Twitter and Instagram at Disney George, and also part of the Grand Circle Tour podcast.
Perfect. Well, thank you, fellas, so much for joining me today. Comment below. What are your thoughts on Chapek? This is crazy. There's so much going on with him, and it is a weird situation. Comment below. What are your theories, your thoughts? Thumbs up,
thumbs
like
up.
it.
Like the video, subscribe.
like,
Do it all.
Thank you all so much for watching, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye, y'all.